Hi there, it's Donovan, and man do I have an obsession with stuffing things where they don't belong. Maybe that's why the cops are here. Baby, god damn, I want a 32X. System add-ons are ways to keep interest in your systems going throughout the generation. They're also ways of adding features to your system that it wasn't able to do back when it released. These little sex toys, add-ons, are not prevalent at all today, mainly due to advancements in technology. Nintendo has had a very rocky road with their add-ons, featuring not one, not two, but 4 whole add-ons, and they were all failures. You'd think they learned their lesson, but no! They kept doing it. You compare the 64DD to the 32X when you should be comparing it to EDP445. The Famicom was doing very well in Japan, but there was one problem: the pricing of games. Remember, video games were a completely new concept, and normal people weren't used to spending so much yen on them. Unless you were in America. Like, come on, you saw this and threw all your money in? Did you expect Jesus Christ to come out of your TV? Also, you did have to keep in mind the expense of cartridges and the burden they are for devs and customers. But Nintendo found a solution with magnetic floppy disks. They were cheaper, and most intriguing to them, they were able to be rewritten. Customers can save some yen by rewriting their disc for new games instead of buying new cartridges, so Nintendo quickly hacked up their first ever add-on, the Famicom Disk System. The add-on came with the disk system itself and a RAM adapter. The disk system correlates with the Famicom's color scheme and is a very nice touch. Their disc cards also had a little Nintendo engraving, but it wasn't for aesthetics, but for anti-piracy. These guys must have really hated Pirates of the Caribbean. The disc system at first sold pretty well and was marketed with this little guy, Discoon. And its success could also be thanked with its launch title, a little game series known as the Hyrule Fantasy: The Legend of Zelda. Gee! From 85 to 87, Nintendo was pretty serious about their first-party releases for the disk system because all games were made exclusively for it. Kid Icarus, Super Mario Bros. 2, and Metroid all made their debut with the disk system. There was even a little start animation, and because of the extra RAM, disk-based games had more memory, could be saved, and actually had superior sound. Now in stores, they housed disc writer kiosks to rewrite games. It had its own very funky animation and such a cool design, like it's a virgin's wet dream. And they had no reason to put music in the kiosk, but they did. The disc system was also an early form of competitive gaming. Players could submit scores through the disc fax machine for competitions and could win these awesome prizes. This is great and all, but when does it all crash and burn? The disc cards were very fragile, and if people were abusing their cartridges back then, what did you think was going to happen? Also, discs introduced a new nuisance to video games: load times. It also didn't help that the main reason for justifying this purchase was becoming irrelevant. Cartridges were being manufactured to hold more data and were becoming less expensive. The main point of the system was essentially killed off, and it didn't help that purchasing one was expensive itself. Third-party devs started jumping ship and kept developing for cartridges, and eventually, Nintendo accepted defeat and did the same, and even converted their disc-based games to cartridges. It sold 4.5 million, which isn't terrible, but it wasn't what they expected. There were indeed plans to create the disc system for the NES, but it fell apart just like the product itself. But somehow, these lunatics serviced the system all the way up to 2003. What loser was playing Donkey Kong 3 that day? I was. Moving on to the Super Famicom, we gotta talk about this orphan again. The topic of CDs once again perked developers' ears with the thought of bigger and cheaper games in mind. Sega was already hopping on the CD trend with the Sega CD, and you don't want to look like a bitch next to Sega. That'd be embarrassing. So Nintendo struck an agreement with Sony to create a CD add-on for the Super Famicom. This is why you don't have sex before marriage. What the hell you're gonna do with the kid once you split? The Super Disc PlayStation was conceived and is a huge fascination of gaming technology. There are functioning prototypes out in the wild, and it's interesting to take a closer look at. It was going to be attached to the bottom of the system, but prototypes shown here are basically the PlayStation and Super Famicom fused into one. There's also a start screen. Now, what went wrong? Oh, a lot went wrong. Nintendo one night was having a blast and decided to read over their contract with Sony for shits and giggles. Let's see here. Fuck you, bitch! Sony would have developed and maintained control over the Super Disc format and would have essentially been stealing all of the software licensing from Nintendo. Nintendo said, screw this, and partnered up with Philips behind their back and licensed some awful CD games to them.
Lucky shot! Golly! You've killed me! Good Good.
I won! I won!
And on top of that, just when Sony was about to announce their partnership, Nintendo announced their new partnership and publicly humiliated Sony. The Nintendo PlayStation was a story that ended in infamy. A story of an ambitious add-on that ended in company greed and spite. And it's a story that unintentionally created Nintendo's worst nightmare. Now it's time to talk about an add-on that actually did release. The Super Famicom Satellaview was Japan exclusive and a neat collaboration with Japanese radio station St. Giga. It was another add-on that attached to the bottom of the base system and seamlessly integrates its design with the base system. It looks very sleek when attached. You needed the BSX cartridge to access all of the Satellaview's features, as well as this, and that, which would have probably cost an absurd amount of money for this service. What made the Satellaview special was its satellite service provided by St. Giga, where special programs like Nintendo Propaganda, Time Games, and a sound link were broadcasted to games. There was a full-on BSX hub world that's very inspired by Earthbound, kinda like a mini Wada Wada Plaza. But most eye-catching was its broadcasted Time Games. They broadcasted 16-bit Mario remakes, Kirby minigames, an F-Zero BSX version, and most interesting, a 16-bit version of The Legend of Zelda. These games were only up for a limited time, but thanks to preservationists, we can experience some of these one-of-a-kind games anytime. Also, the soundlink portion of the Satellaview was really cool. It was basically live radio commentators and voice actors for video games, which was a radical new idea at the time. And hey, look, a start screen! Okay guys, you're sending too many kids to the orphanage, just use protection. So why did the Satellaview fail? God damn it, another divorce? Only around 116,000 were sold, and with dwindling subscribers and what seems like the 10th divorce filing, the BSX Satellaview service was no more.
No, I'm not doing it. I can't stop making kids, man. Just take him.
Third or 4 times the fucking charm. Okay, so the PlayStation. That didn't go well. Son of a bitch. Nintendo for the 5th generation was still adamant on using cartridges as their main format of choice, while Sega and now Sony were moving on to CDs. Nintendo was afraid of CDs because of their long load times and of course, piracy. Dude, just give up, you're not gonna win. Of course this turned off devs from the N64 and just flocked to Sony's superior format and contracts. But Nintendo wasn't gonna go down without a fight because in '95, they announced that the N64 would have a disc add-on. Put a nice asterisk next to disc. The Nintendo 64 disk drive was announced before the base system even released. It was indeed going to use discs. Magnetic floppy disks.
Just shoot me already.
Yeah, they did provide more space than standard cartridges, but it still pales in comparison to regular CDs. It was another sleek looking submissive add-on that, with the expansion pack, could provide more RAM and a clock, but it also came with an online service called RadNet, and similar to the BSX, you could read Nintendo propaganda, but also email, chat, and commit tax fraud. So many games were planned for the N64DD. This was going to be Nintendo's Jesus Christ. Zelda 64, Kirby 64, Dragon Quest 7, Earthbound 64, heck, even Super Mario 64 2 were planned for the DD. This was a huge, highly ambitious project that could show those PlayStation bastards who's boss. Too bad the system kept getting delayed over and over and over again. And not to mention the failing interest in the N64 itself and the practical use of the DD, with Nintendo's own games being converted from discs back to cartridges. Games like Dragon Quest 7 were no longer interested in Nintendo's failed promises and moved to PlayStation. Zelda, Kirby, Banjo-Kazooie all moved to cartridge, and games like Earthbound were just cancelled, but the damn thing finally released. In 1999, only in Japan, when Sony was announcing the PS2, nobody cared at this point. But it did happen and had interesting Mario Artist games, a very cool expansion to F-Zero X with custom track editors and more, and had a weird cult following game called Doshin the Giant that would later be re-released for the GameCube. After that, wow. It just died on the spot. If only Nintendo played their cards right. If only they had good relationships with third parties. If only they had switched to CDs. If only they released this damn thing on time. Things would have been different for them. It can be said that the promises of the N64DD was what killed the N64 and led PlayStation to market domination.
You've killed me!
Only around 15,000 were sold and was killed in 2001. Jesus Christ had only 2 years to live. But it did have a start screen. If we're counting the Super Game Boy and Game Boy Player as add-ons, those are the only truly successful ones that really enhance the handheld experience at home.
Wow. I got nothing else to say. Nintendo is just full of stubborn idiots that lead to their own demise. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got another kit to make. No! I swear to God, this is the last one.